Long before Bitcoin shook the foundations of global finance and rewrote the language of value, a hidden movement was already brewing beneath the surface of cyberspace, a rebellion of mathematicians, programmers, and dreamers who dared to imagine a world where money could exist without masters. The history of cryptocurrency did not begin with Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper in 2008, it began decades earlier, in the minds of the cypherpunks, a loose collective of digital anarchists from the 1990s who believed privacy was a human right and encryption was its armor. They gathered on obscure mailing lists, speaking in code and ideals, dreaming of a future where individuals, not governments, controlled their wealth and identities. The Internet was still young then, but the cypherpunks saw beyond its novelty. They saw the possibility of liberation. Among them was David Chaum, a visionary cryptographer who, in the 1980s, designed DigiCash, the first true attempt at anonymous digital money. Chaum's idea was radical: to build an electronic cash system where transactions could occur without banks, without surveillance, without trust in intermediaries, a digital bearer instrument that embodied freedom itself. His invention, called e-cash, used cryptographic blinding to allow payments to be verified without revealing who spent them. It was elegant, private, and decades ahead of its time. But like many ideas born too soon, DigiCash fell victim to the inertia of the world around it. The technology was sound, but the world was not ready. Banks were threatened, regulators were confused, and the public still trusted the paper in their wallets more than the code in their computers. Yet Chaum's failure planted a seed, one that would sprout later in the minds of a new generation of cryptographers who shared his vision of untraceable digital cash. As the 1990s unfolded, the cypherpunk manifesto circulated through underground forums, proclaiming that privacy is necessary for an open society in the electronic age. To them, encryption was not merely math, it was resistance, a political act wrapped in algorithms. They used tools like PGP to send secret messages and began experimenting with the idea of money that could move with the same freedom as information. From this soil emerged Adam Back, a British cryptographer whose creation, Hashcash, became a crucial stepping stone toward Bitcoin. Hashcash introduced the concept of proof of work, a mechanism requiring computers to solve computational puzzles before sending emails, a clever way to deter spam. But beneath that simple purpose lay something profound, the idea that computation itself could be a form of value, that the expenditure of energy and processing power could represent digital scarcity. This notion, quietly revolutionary, would later become the beating heart of Bitcoin's design. Around the same time, others like Wei Dai proposed B-Money, and Nick Szabo designed BitGold, both of which outlined systems of decentralized digital currency using cryptographic proof rather than trust. They were conceptual blueprints for a world without banks or central authorities, decentralized, open, and borderless. None of them gained adoption, but they provided the intellectual DNA from which Satoshi Nakamoto would later engineer Bitcoin. While the cypherpunks dreamed of freedom, their ideas were also fueled by philosophy, particularly the principles of Austrian economics, which warned against the dangers of central banking and inflationary money. Thinkers like Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises had long argued that centralized control over money leads to manipulation and decay, that true economic stability can only exist when money is governed by the market, not the state. These ideas took root in the minds of early crypto visionaries, merging with the libertarian ethos of the digital age. They saw Bitcoin and its conceptual ancestors as the logical culmination of a centuries-long fight for financial sovereignty. To them, decentralization was not just a technical architecture, it was a moral stance. In the same way that the printing press had broken the monopoly of knowledge, decentralized currency would break the monopoly of money. Science fiction also played its part. Stories of cybernetic societies and digital economies inspired programmers to imagine systems beyond human control, where trust was embedded in code, not institutions. The boundary between imagination and invention blurred, and slowly, the foundation of a new monetary era was being written not in gold or ink, but in mathematics. When Satoshi Nakamoto appeared in 2008, releasing the Bitcoin white paper to a small cryptography mailing list, few realized that the dream of the cypherpunks had finally taken form. The world was still reeling from the global financial crisis, banks had collapsed, and confidence in the monetary system was shattered. Satoshi's message landed like a spark in dry grass. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It was concise, technical, and revolutionary. What made it unique was not just its use of Hashcash-style proof of work, but its seamless fusion of cryptography, game theory, and economic design, a self-sustaining system where no single entity held control. The white paper read like both a manifesto and a manual for a new civilization. Satoshi's genius lay in synthesis, combining the unfulfilled dreams of DG Cash, the computational elegance of Hashcash, and the anarchic ethos of the cypherpunks into a single, functioning organism. But what truly set Bitcoin apart was its anonymity. No one knew who Satoshi was, whether an individual, a group, or an institution. And that mystery became part of the legend. Satoshi's disappearance in 2010 only deepened the enigma, transforming Bitcoin from a project into a myth. Yet behind the myth was a purpose of philosophical rebellion wrapped in code. Satoshi's anonymity wasn't an accident, it was a statement. By erasing the creator, Bitcoin was left without a central figure to worship or persecute. It became an idea that could not be killed, a decentralized organism immune to authority. In doing so, Satoshi achieved what many before him could not. He removed trust not only from money, but from human ego itself. That act of self-erasure made Bitcoin immortal in a way no centralized currency could ever be. As the first blocks, the Genesis blocks, were mined, a new kind of history began to write itself, not in books or ledgers, but in the immutable blockchain, a chain of truth secured by computation and consensus. In the Coinbase message of Bitcoin's very first block, Satoshi left a cryptic note, the Times 03/Jan/2009 Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. It was both a timestamp and a declaration of war, a reminder that Bitcoin was born from the ashes of financial failure. Bitcoin's early adopters were not investors chasing profit, they were believers chasing freedom. They gathered on IRC channels and obscure forums, discussing hash rates, block sizes, and the philosophical meaning of decentralization. The first transaction, the now legendary Bitcoin pizza purchase of 10,000 BTC, symbolized both innocence and absurdity, a moment when value was measured in belief rather than price. But as Bitcoin's network grew, so did its mythology. It attracted not only idealists and coders but speculators, libertarians, and visionaries who saw in it the potential to rewrite the social contract. Still, even among its followers, divisions emerged between those who saw Bitcoin as a tool for liberation and those who saw it as a vehicle for wealth. The same technology that promised equality began to reflect human nature in all its contradictions. As the decade progressed, the Bitcoin network began to spread like a rumor whispered through the digital underground, moving from the hands of cryptographers into the minds of dreamers, traders, and rebels. Forums such as Bitcoin Talk became digital temples where early believers debated mining difficulty, transaction validation, and the moral consequences of financial sovereignty. They saw themselves not as users of a currency, but as participants in a grand social experiment. The early miners ran their computers day and night, not for profit, but to strengthen the network's heartbeat. Each solved block was a message to the world: we can create trust without authority. For the first time in history, people were transacting with something that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a form of money that existed only as encrypted mathematics shared across thousands of computers. Governments could not seize it, banks could not inflate it, and no corporation could own it. That realization was intoxicating. To those who had watched the financial system collapse in 2008, Bitcoin was not just a technology, it was redemption. Yet the wider world was slow to understand. For years, Bitcoin remained a curiosity, dismissed by economists as a fad and by the media as a playground for hackers. But deep within the Internet, its roots were spreading. The blockchain, this new kind of decentralized ledger, was unlike anything the world had seen. It was transparent yet private, public yet untouchable. Every transaction was visible, but no central authority could alter it. That paradox of visibility and immutability gave rise to an entirely new form of trust, one built not on institutions, but on cryptography and consensus. As Bitcoin grew, it began to attract attention from an unlikely mix of communities: libertarians who saw it as a weapon against state control, technologists who admired its mathematical beauty, and criminals who recognized its anonymity as a shield. For every visionary who saw Bitcoin as digital gold, there was a skeptic who saw it as digital chaos. The infamous Silk Road marketplace became both a symbol of Bitcoin's power and a stain on its reputation, proof that a decentralized system could empower freedom, but also lawlessness. Yet even as headlines painted Bitcoin as the currency of crime, the network continued to evolve. New developers joined, improving the code, patching vulnerabilities, and building the foundations for what would later become a global financial ecosystem. The ethos of the cypherpunks still pulsed within it: code was law, and privacy was power. What made Bitcoin resilient was not perfection but decentralization, the fact that no single failure could destroy it. It was an organism made of consensus, growing stronger with every challenge. Governments tried to regulate it, economists tried to dismiss it, and yet it persisted, thriving in the cracks between systems of control. It was the Internet of money, and no one could turn it off. But Bitcoin's rise also brought questions about its meaning. Was it a rebellion or a revolution? A technology or a philosophy? Some early adopters watched in dismay as speculative trading replaced ideological conviction. What began as a movement for monetary freedom was now being reshaped by greed and hype. The price surges drew crowds, but the purpose began to blur. Satoshi's original vision of a peer-to-peer electronic cash system seemed to fade beneath waves of speculation. Yet even in its distortion, Bitcoin's influence could not be denied. It had forced the world to confront questions it had long ignored: what is money? Who should control it? And can trust exist without authority? These were not just technical questions, they were moral and existential ones. In that sense, Bitcoin was less a product and more a mirror, reflecting humanity's relationship with power, freedom, and value. Its success exposed the fragility of the old order and inspired countless innovators to imagine alternatives. The blockchain, once a simple transaction log, became a canvas for new dreams, smart contracts, decentralized applications, autonomous organizations, all emerging from the same principle that no one should have absolute control. As the crypto movement expanded, new coins and projects emerged, each claiming to improve upon Bitcoin or fulfill a different purpose. Some pursued privacy, others speed or scalability, and some sought to reshape finance itself. Ethereum introduced programmability to blockchain, turning money into a platform for logic and creativity. Projects like Monero and Zcash revived the cypherpunk dream of true anonymity. The diversity of experiments reflected the same restless spirit that had driven the pioneers of the 1990s, an unending desire to decentralize, to distribute power, to encode fairness into algorithms. But with innovation came fragmentation. Ideological battles erupted within the community, debates over block size, mining centralization, and governance models divided believers into factions. The question that haunted them was simple but profound: can a decentralized world still find consensus? The irony was that a technology designed to unite humanity in trustless cooperation was now exposing how difficult cooperation truly is. Still, this chaos was not without purpose. In its friction, crypto evolved. In its arguments, it grew stronger. Just as the Internet had once been dismissed as a passing trend before transforming every aspect of life, cryptocurrency was following the same unpredictable trajectory. Behind all of this remained the enduring shadow of Satoshi Nakamoto. More than a decade after Bitcoin's creation, no one truly knew who they were. Theories abounded: was it a single genius, a group of developers, a government agency, or perhaps even a myth deliberately constructed to protect the project? The search for Satoshi became a modern legend, drawing journalists, detectives, and conspiracy theorists alike. Yet perhaps the real answer lay not in who Satoshi was, but why they chose to disappear. By vanishing, they had given Bitcoin the greatest gift possible: decentralization in its purest form. Without a leader to follow, the network was forced to lead itself. Every participant became both a user and a guardian, every node a keeper of truth. Satoshi's silence became sacred, a reminder that ideas transcend their creators. Their anonymity was not weakness but strength, a shield against corruption, ego, and control. It allowed Bitcoin to belong to everyone and no one at the same time. And that paradox became its greatest power. Even now, as central banks experiment with digital currencies and governments attempt to regulate the blockchain, the spirit of the cypherpunks endures. It lives in every line of open-source code, every decentralized exchange, every miner who validates a block not for authority but for principle. The vision that began with David Chaum's DigiCash and found its voice in Satoshi's white paper continues to evolve in forms both expected and surprising. Cryptocurrency is no longer just about money, it has become a philosophy, a culture, a movement toward autonomy in an age of surveillance. It asks each of us to decide what kind of world we want to build, one governed by trust in institutions or one governed by mathematics and transparency. Neither path is perfect, but the choice itself is revolutionary. As the story of cryptocurrency continues to unfold, one truth becomes clear: it is no longer just about coins, markets, or speculation, it is about the very nature of freedom in the digital age. What began as an experiment in mathematics has become a mirror reflecting humanity's struggle for autonomy in an increasingly centralized world. Bitcoin, and the countless innovations it inspired, are more than code. They are expressions of resistance, hope, and evolution. The dream that first flickered in the minds of cypherpunks now lives in millions of wallets and billions of transactions across the planet. Every node that hums in silence, every miner who validates a block, every transaction broadcast across the blockchain, all are silent votes for a different kind of world, one where power is distributed, not imposed. Yet this freedom is fragile. The forces that once sought to control paper money now turn their gaze toward digital currency. Governments experiment with central bank digital currencies, promising efficiency but often hiding surveillance. Corporations build platforms that mimic decentralization but quietly hold the keys. And as the digital economy expands, the same question that haunted the cypherpunks returns: who controls the code, and therefore, who controls the future? The answer will define the century. Cryptocurrency gave humanity a tool, but tools are only as moral as the hands that use them. For every visionary building a system of transparency, there is another trying to exploit it for control. The blockchain's greatest paradox remains that it can both free and enslave, depending on what values we embed within it. The next phase of this story is not technological, but ethical. The future of digital freedom depends not on algorithms, but on intention. As artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and digital governance reshape the boundaries of privacy and identity, the blockchain stands as both a shield and a test. It asks us, will we use transparency to empower individuals or to expose them? Will decentralization remain a path to equality, or become another tool of domination disguised as progress? History has shown that every great invention can be corrupted, but it has also shown that ideas rooted in truth can outlive corruption itself. Bitcoin's resilience, its unbroken operation for more than a decade despite attacks, bans, and ridicule, is a reminder that ideas built on mathematics and consensus can endure even when institutions collapse. That resilience is not just technical, it is spiritual. It speaks to the timeless human desire to be free to transact, to communicate, to exist without permission. In that sense, cryptocurrency is not merely a revolution in finance but a continuation of humanity's oldest pursuit, the pursuit of sovereignty over one's own destiny. The coming years will test whether we truly understand the meaning of decentralization. It will not be enough to hold crypto, we must hold on to the principles that created it: privacy, openness, and voluntary cooperation. The cypherpunks wrote, "We must defend our privacy if we expect to have any." That line, once whispered on obscure mailing lists, now echoes through the policies of nations and the minds of generations who have never known a world without the Internet. The true legacy of cryptocurrency will not be its price charts or its market cap, it will be the transformation of trust itself from something given to institutions to something proven by code. If humanity can learn to balance freedom with responsibility, anonymity with accountability, and innovation with ethics, then this technology will not merely survive, it will redefine civilization. But if we fail, if we allow greed or fear to corrupt the dream, then the blockchain will become just another chain, invisible but unbreakable, binding us to the systems we once sought to escape. And yet, even in that uncertainty, there is hope. For every centralized power that rises, there are thousands of decentralized minds building in quiet rebellion. For every wall built, a new protocol is born to bypass it. The spirit that created Bitcoin cannot be outlawed, because it was never a person or a company, it was an idea. And ideas, once released, do not die, they evolve. Somewhere, in a quiet room, another mind is writing the next chapter of this story. Perhaps a new Satoshi will emerge, or perhaps the future will belong to all of us collectively, the guardians of code, the keepers of digital freedom. In the end, the secret history of cryptocurrency is not a story of machines, but of meaning, the meaning of trust, of power, of what it means to be free in a world of endless surveillance. The blockchain does not forget, and neither should we. It is our memory, our mirror, and our map to the future. The cypherpunks once believed that privacy was the last form of resistance. Today, perhaps freedom itself is. And so the ledger continues, each block a heartbeat, each transaction a whisper of defiance, as humanity moves deeper into the digital frontier, still searching not just for wealth, but for wisdom. For in the end, the greatest currency we will ever create is not digital or physical, it is trust, and the courage to protect it.